This is The Sports Life.
Gives to Garcia. Heaves a 40-footer. He hit a 40-footer to win it. He hit a 40-footer to win it. From straight on. Right at the logo. 84-81. The Gophers are off the Schneid.
And welcome into the Sports Life. We'll team in here along with Dalton Shetler. Mike Grimm, the voice of the Golden Gophers. Finally, a fun moment at the barn up in Minneapolis. What a great win for the Gophers, who have struggled. They knock off previously unbeaten Michigan with that crazy shot by Garcia. And like Mike said, it was a long way out, but it was true to form, no doubt. Well, in terms of our show we have for you today, it's a good one. And one of the things I think you're really going to enjoy is our visit with Paul Keels, the longtime voice of the Ohio State Buckeyes, as he talks about his journey from the ups and downs the Buckeyes have had, from that disappointment against Michigan to winning the national championship.
Oh, that should be really enriching later on. And also, we're going to be catching up with some of the big topics in college athletics. Deb Schneider, who's a sports law attorney professor at Michigan State and Wayne State Universities and a big friend of the program here at the Sports Life. She'll join us to talk about the situation happening with the Big Ten Conference and Xavier Lucas, the Wisconsin defensive back, and his unique situation, unprecedented. It's the first of its kind with Miami. And also, we'll be catching up with Ben Portnoy from the Sports Business Journal to talk a little bit about the business of the college football playoffs and see what the ratings did here in the latest installment.
Well, you ready?
Absolutely. Let's dive into the sounds of the week. And let's go ahead and start with, we just mentioned a moment ago, Ohio State, national champions of the college football world. Ohio State head coach Ryan Day spoke after the game about what this ride has been like, with the sound coming courtesy of CBS Sports.
These guys learned a bunch of life lessons, but they're going to go down in Ohio State history as one of the greatest teams to ever play at Ohio State. After all the things that have been said throughout the year, these guys are going to be cemented as one of the best stories in Ohio State history and one of the best football teams ever. Only 9 teams have ever done it, and 3 in over 50 years. These guys right here. And there was a point where not a lot of people had that vision, but these guys did, and they saw it through. And Ohio State may not be for everybody, but it's for these guys, and I'm really proud of them.
Ryan Day, the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and he should be very proud of him. What a job they did.
Oh, no kidding. And to go through that emotional roller coaster, we saw what the fan reaction had been from the end of November to that point. For the players to stay with it after losing to Michigan, to win it all in the national championship, some really impressive stuff. Let's switch over to basketball. Michigan State men's basketball had a huge matchup, top 20 game against Illinois at the Breslin Center over the weekend. Michigan State got the win in a close one down the stretch. The Spartans get the victory, and head coach Tom Izzo spoke afterwards on the radio network about how Michigan State got it done and the emotions involved.
Wow, that's an understatement of all understatements. We did the things we wanted to do. We shot better, and we said one of the big keys, and unfortunately it was us watching the Lions last night, because I've always said in football and basketball, turnovers end up the difference in a game, and we only had 8 turnovers for the game, which I think is a season low for us. We just had different guys that stepped up, and that was great for us.
Tom Izzo, the dean of all Big Ten basketball coaches, and in that last line, Dalton, we just had some guys step up. Well, that's been the whole season in this long winning streak. Guys have just stepped up. He plays 10, and they all contribute. Think about this. This team averages over 80 points a ball game. Only one player averages in double digits. It's crazy, but it's just a wonderful team.
They say teamwork makes the dream work, and the Spartans are the embodiment of that with all the depth stepping up. That was really, really pretty neat to hear from head coach Tom Izzo. And, of course, the win came at the expense of the Fighting Illini. And for Illinois fans, they felt that the situation with Yaku Chonis of Illinois, their, of course, freshman talented player who might end up being an All-American when it's all said and done. He fouled out of the game, was off the floor for long stretches of this game in foul trouble, and head coach Brad Underwood spoke a little bit about that a few days after the game. Again, it's been a big conversation, at least on social media. Here was his take with the sound coming courtesy of Carson Gordy.
I don't know, pat the officials on the rear end, call them by name, tell them you love them, give them a hug, send them roses. I've been in conversation with the league on multiple, they agree. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you do. The fifth one was probably a foul. I mean, most, especially star players, don't get those little incidental things like that. But I don't know. That was tough. Just tough night. It's a shame that America on CBS before an NFL game didn't get to see one of the two freshman All-Americans today named, and nobody got to see him, and truly feel bad that the people in East Lansing didn't get to see him.
Well, that's Brad Underwood, the head coach of the University of Illinois, talking about his star player, Yakichonis, who spent most of his time on the bench in that Michigan State game because of foul difficulties. I'll add two things to that conversation. It's pretty universal that the officiating in the Big Ten has not been consistent for sure, and I don't think they're having their best year. But on the other hand, if you look at the whole body of work, I can point to games where Yakichonis played, and he got the start treatment. So there's your problem. If he does something against the University of Washington and it's okay, and then he does it against Michigan State University and it's not okay, that's a problem. And that is one of the biggest problems we have right now. And these players, these coaches, they work so hard, they deserve better.
Fair point, and frankly co-signed. But I do want to go over, because it's not the only frustration with fouls that happened in the Big Ten over the weekend. You had Michigan and Northwestern battling one out. There was a flagrant foul called against the Wildcats, and Northwestern head coach Chris Collins talked about it afterwards. And, of course, the incident involved Michigan star player Vlad Golden, and you'll get to hear what head coach Chris Collins thought of the sequence after the contest.
I think the people that make the rules don't. Vlad Golden is 7'1", 275 pounds, setting a moving screen, and Jalen's trying to get over the top of it, and there's contact. And was it malicious? In my opinion, no. But that's the way the rule is, and it's a tough thing. I mean, it's just kind of, we had it 2 years in a row, and it just sucks because Jalen was playing great. He was making shots, he was attacking. Obviously, he's our main ball handler, and I thought, was it a big play in the game? Absolutely. I mean, what do you have, 20 points when he came out? So, just a difficult. But again, I'm not blaming the officials because I know that's the rule because we just lived it last year with Langborg at Rutgers. I just think some common sense has to apply. If a kid's fighting to get through a screen and there's some incidental contact to that area, and I'll give him credit too. He's if he doesn't make the NBA, which he probably does, he's gonna have a hell of an acting career going forward. Guy's a great actor. We saw it at Florida. We've seen it 2 times in a row. He's really good at it. Give him credit. I mean that in a complimentary way.
I'm sure he does.
It's hard to hear it that way, but I think he genuinely was trying to offer that as a compliment.
Well, at the end of the day, like we said earlier, if you can get away with it, why not? Mm-hmm. Everybody's looking for an edge to win a game. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of issues here. And Coach Collins used that term common sense. Well, I don't know how you instill that, but we need some of that too.
Yep.
And so why are we continually talking about the officials after all these games? Officials, front and center in an overtime game. Officials, front and center in a great game between Michigan State and Illinois. At some point, you got to go where there's smoke, there's fire, and maybe we should take a harder look at stuff. And I don't know what the answers are, but there's got to be some answers somewhere. Well, when we come back with more of the Sports Life, we're going to visit with Paul Keels, the longtime voice of the Ohio State Buckeyes, as he's going to talk about this wonderful journey he was on that led to Ohio State becoming the National Football Champions. Back with more in just a moment.
So, got one for you, boss.
Oh, yeah?
What's black, white, and dented all over?
I give up.
The company truck. I know, but thanks to our agent, we've already submitted an insurance claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Lucky for you, that's simple human sense.
Ask your independent agent if auto owners make sense for you.
Medicaid and CHIP offer free or low-cost health coverage for children and teens. Hospital and doctor visits, prescriptions, shots, and more are covered. That's peace of mind for parents if a child is sick or gets injured. And parents may now be eligible for Medicaid too, even if they've applied in the past. Enrollment is always open. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 1-877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
If you have diabetes, listen up. If you have insurance, you can qualify for a continuous glucose monitor. With a CGM, you can continuously track your levels and trends and spend more time in range, significantly lowering your A1C. More importantly, a CGM eliminates the one thing most people with diabetes hate, painful finger sticks. Order your new continuous glucose monitor today. If you use insulin and if you've seen your diabetes care provider within the last 6 months, you may qualify for your own CGM right now. We'll do all the insurance paperwork and deliver your new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost to you. Medicare and most insurances will cover your CGM, so don't wait. Have your insurance handy and call the Aptiva Medical CGM Health Hotline right now.
800-948-6912. 800-948-6912. 800-948-6912. That's 800-948-6912.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
Roxanne Watson is on a mission.
Hello, how are you doing today?
She wants more people to register as organ, eye, and tissue donors.
Are you an organ donor?
Yes, I am.
Yay.
My goal is to sign up the most people in the United States.
What drives her? Roxanne's own life was saved through the gift of a heart transplant, made possible by an organ donor.
I decided that day that I was going to devote myself to the cause of organ donation and signing people up and honoring my donor by doing that.
Now she's back to health, and she's a powerful force helping to save lives every day through her work. Imagine what you can make possible by leaving behind the gift of life.
8 people can be helped with the major organs, and up to 50 people can be helped with a little bit of everything. And when you think about it that way, that you could help that many people, it's amazing. It really is.
Learn more and sign up as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
Seven seconds left. Notre Dame trying to hustle the line of scrimmage. 4 seconds left. 3 seconds. Leonard gets the Irish on the ball. Leonard gets the snap. Back to throw Riley Leonard. Rolls to his right at his 20. Leonard sails that middle of the field where it's caught by Greathouse. He's tackled at the 40. Tackled by Jordan Hancock, and Ohio State, national champions, beating Notre Dame tonight. 34-23, the 9th national championship in Ohio State history. A team that got into the playoffs and they played angry and determined. And they give Ryan Day his first national championship.
So there you go, the final call from the legendary voice of the Ohio State Buckeyes, Paul Keels, as the Buckeyes become national champions. What a journey Ohio State had this year with all kinds of ups and downs. And joining us now to talk about it is Paul Keels. And Paul, by the way, congratulations on your 3rd title as the voice of the Ohio State Buckeyes. But thanks for joining us. Can you just give us a little idea of what this journey was like? Because it had to be crazy.
It was. And, Ohio State, like a number of others, benefited from the new format, a 12-team playoff. It had been the previous versions. They would not have gotten in with 2 losses, even though it was a 1-point loss to Oregon and a shocking 3-point loss at home to Michigan. They would have been left out. But after that loss to Michigan and even some of the craziness that went on afterwards with the brawl on the field and planting the flag and all of that, this team pulled themselves together in a rather unique way. And they did play a little angry. They did play a little determined. And they knew there was still one big goal out there to be had. And they were able to take advantage of getting in this new format and really answering some of the questions that had been there. Offensively, they exploded when they had not against Michigan. Defensively, ever since the loss in October to Oregon, they had tightened things up, and that purpose carried them all the way through the 4 games of the postseason.
Paul, as the voice of the Buckeyes, I mean, one of the great privileges, right, of being the voice of the team is you get to narrate their story. You get to tell their story. And Will mentioned this is the third one of these national championships you've gotten to tell to the fans of the Ohio State Buckeyes. This one, we know about the story this year, right? You lose to Michigan. You just kind of talked through about some of the adversity. Things were really tense, and then you go on this run. It's an incredible story, but I want to ask you to compare it to some of the others because in 2014, in the first iteration of the college football playoff, you're down to a third-string quarterback in Cardale Jones, and somehow you upset Alabama and go on to win that. And in 2002, that was a team that just kept finding ways to win ball games. I mean, you've had three pretty special seasons with these championships. How do you compare and contrast it to the previous?
Well, but they're all different with how they got there, Dalton. The 2002 one, at least in my role, was special because it was the first one. But it was also for Ohio State fans, their first since 1968. And there were so many John Cooper teams who, if it had been a 14 playoff, it had been a 12-team playoff, would have gotten in and maybe could have done what this year's team did. But, they had so many cliffhangers, including their double overtime win over Miami. 2014, because 10 days before the season starts, Braxton Miller gets hurt for the season. They lose the second week of the year to Virginia Tech, their home opener. And at that point, people are wondering, can they even get into a bowl game? But they march on through. And the win they had in East Lansing that night game against Michigan State was significant because that win pushed them into a position in the playoff rankings to where it started to become maybe possible. And then to be able to, in the semis, knock off Alabama, who'd been the king of the SEC, defeat an Oregon team who had just destroyed Florida State in the semis. So that was a completely different journey, and in the first year of the 14 playoffs. And then this one, you just didn't know after they'd lost to Michigan, would this team have enough to pull themselves together? And then, not only do they're able to get back on their home field and make the home fans feel better about things with the way they beat Tennessee, but then going out to the Rose Bowl to play an Oregon team that they had lost to, and an Oregon team that seemingly had everything going their way, and to jump on Oregon and beat them the way they did, maybe started to get people to believe in this team. And then the way they beat Texas with the Jack Sawyer fumble return for a touchdown. And then two big brand names meeting with Ohio State and Notre Dame for the title. So they were all very unique and very different.
Well, Paul, there's a people part to this business. And I know from just our conversations, you and your crew, you like Ryan Day. You think he's a good guy, let alone a good football coach. I had my TV on in the post-game after Ohio State beats Notre Dame, and I watched Kirk Herbstreit, a former Buckeye quarterback, but a pretty good announcer, and he does a great job of being neutral when he's doing a game involving Ohio State. I watched him get all choked up when they talked about what this meant to Ryan Day and his family in the program. So how were you feeling when all this was going on? Because I just got to believe, as you were watching your friend get ambushed by fans, it was bothering you a little bit.
Well, Ryan Day, as we've talked about, and you guys know, he's, number one, such a wonderful human being. And I think that had a lot to do with why they decided to make him the head coach when they did. And with, his record speaks for itself. The 4-game losing streak to Michigan speaks for itself, and it has its own life. And those losses have kept them from having at least in one case, one opportunity from getting into the playoffs, despite one of the losses they got in. But after they lost to Michigan, what Ryan Day went through and his family was awful. I mean, he had to get 24-hour security around his home. I don't believe his kids went to school for a while. Just the threats and the nastiness and the vile things that were expressed at he and his family went beyond the frustration of losing to your rival for a fourth straight year. But to his credit and to his family's credit, they strengthened themselves amongst one another. He and his football team pulled themselves together, and they got back after it, and they achieved the ultimate goal. And that, in our business, you're not supposed to develop some of those relationships. You're not, supposed to be, kind of pulling individually for people, but it's hard not to do it with certain folks. And we've been fortunate at Ohio State with a lot of the coaches here to be able to do that. And Ryan Day is just such a wonderful human being. And the other endorsement of that, look at how his players react to him. If you remember the image of Jack Sawyer picking him up on the sideline at the end of that Texas game, that tells you all you need to know about how so many people feel about Ryan Day.
Well, and I tell you something else that was pretty fascinating on the topic of Ryan Day. I believe it was Dave Revson who said it on the Big Ten Network, that with that win, his winning percentage now climbs the all-time ranks. I think first place, it's Walter Camp. Second place, Newt Rockne. Third place, Ryan Day. And that really seems to speak volumes, given all the stories we're talking about there with the emotional and personal part of this. But it's an amazing resume he has.
It really is, Dalton. And you think about, number one, through the course of his time as head coach, he had to learn and he had to make tough decisions about replacing assistant coaches, which was not easy for him, and things that kind of caused problems for his predecessor. He also had to make tough decisions on players and has had to navigate the change that comes with the transfer portal, with name, image, and likeness, and continue to put together. Now, it helps when you have the resources that Ohio State has, and there's been a lot talked about, the price tag that was on the players that they got to commit, as well as the players who decided to come back and stay, like Jack Sawyer, Emeka Ibuka, Travion Henderson, and so many others. What he's been able to do has been really remarkable. And, I think also Ohio State's administration deserves some credit for still having faith in him. Ross Bjork had to come out publicly after the Michigan game and say, hey, he's going to be our head coach. There's not going to be any change made here. And, certainly a buyout figures into all of that too. But this is a guy that has gone about doing everything the right way. It's a guy that has recruited at a very high level, a guy that has assembled a good coaching staff. I mean, Chip Kelly doesn't come to Ohio State to be the offensive coordinator if it's not for Ryan Day. So there's a lot of things about what he's done, about his journey, but what he's been able to get this football team to do that really stand alone.
Well, Paul, I'm going to ask you an announcer question now. You ready?
Yes.
We heard your call. You declared Ohio State the national champions. Did you take a moment after that call to just reflect for a second, like, are you kidding me? Look what we've just done.
Yes, and also even before the game, just having had a chance to do that. As an announcer's standpoint, the last time Ohio State played in a national championship game was in 2020, and we had to do the game remotely. We were not able, because of company policy, to travel to any of the away games that year. So we did the national championship game when they lost to Alabama in Miami in a studio in the basement of the Schottenstein Center. So just being able to be there in person, not only for the title game, but for, every game now, you learn not to take that for granted anymore, to be there in person, as difficult as the traveling can be sometimes. But, the first thought that really came to mind was what we had just talked about, guys, about Ryan Day, about those players, everything they had gone through. It just truly was remarkable. I'll tell you the other thought that jumped in my mind, Will. Before the season started, I had a discussion with an acquaintance who is an incredibly passionate Ohio State fan, and maybe a little over the top, who made the comment to me, if Ryan Day doesn't beat Michigan, he's gone. That is just a fan. This is nobody of any importance. And I said to this individual, I said, it's possible. This is before the season. I said, it's possible they could lose to Michigan and still win a national championship. And they didn't want to hear that. But it's crazy that that's what actually ended up happening. So, yeah, you take a minute to think about it, but your thoughts immediately go to those coaches and to those players and their families.
Well, congratulations, Paul. It's fun to be part of something special, and I think you were right smack in the middle of it. So I will see you soon.
You got it. Take care, guys.
Well, there you go. Some of the thoughts of the legendary voice of their Ohio State Buckeyes, Paul Keels. Well, coming up on the Sports Life, we're going to take a look at the maneuvering and some legislation and who's on first. Your normal day in college athletics. It's all coming up in just a moment.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Dad. Did you get a new haircut or something? A new shirt? You're looking good.
What happened?
A little fender bender?
How little?
A few days in the shop little. But thanks to Mom and our agent, we've already submitted a claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto Owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Sounds like simple human sense.
I'm fine, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask.
Ask your independent agent if Auto Owners makes sense for you.
This is a potter's field. When people can't pay for their funerals, they are buried here. It is a lonely, desolate place, littered with unmarked headstones. No one visits. No one leaves flowers. But it doesn't have to be that way. For as low as $1 a day, you can ensure your family will have the money to pay your funeral expenses. We offer burial insurance plans that pay up to $30,000. Considering the average funeral costs more than $10,000, that's peace of mind for your family. There are no medical exams, your rates won't increase, and your policy cannot be canceled as long as you make your premium payments. Call now to get approved in minutes and ensure your final resting place is more than just a pauper's grave in a potter's field.
800-562-2407. 800-562-2407. 800-562-2407. That's 800-562-2407. Paid for by Final Expense Direct.
We all make choices about alcohol. Kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye, Dad. Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, Em, remind me about that party again?
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations, and they want honest answers in everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path, because when you talk, they hear you. Learn more at underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
Here's a real-life story that affects 50% of all of us out there. It's called divorce. If you've gotten divorced and now you're struggling to pay your bills and your credit card debts are completely out of control, you need to call this special debt relief hotline right now. We help people with all kinds of money problems caused by different life challenges, a divorce, a job loss, even heavy medical bills. All these life events can sometimes financially stress you out and cause you to get out of control. We help people get their lives back by showing them ways to consolidate and reduce their debt, in some cases for a fraction of what they owe. If your credit card balances are more than $10,000, call us and learn how to reduce your credit card bills and monthly payments now. Here's our number.
Paid for by Debt.com. Call now, 800-810-1584, 800-810-1584, 800-810-1584. That's 800-810-1584.
And welcome back for more of the Sports Life. Will Team here along with Dalton Shetler. Well, there's always something to talk about when it comes to money and college athletics and who gets what and who goes where. Well, to sort out a piece of information that's sort of getting some headlines, we've asked Deb Schneider to rejoin the show. She's a sports law attorney and professor at Michigan State and Wayne State Universities. And Deb, thanks for joining us. And we'd like to talk to you a little bit about this situation up in Madison, Wisconsin with the University of Wisconsin. Xavier Lucas, who plays football for the Badgers, he's a cornerback. He wants to leave. He wants to go into the portal. He wants to go play for the Hurricanes of Miami. But the Badgers are saying, no, you can't do it. And so can you talk to us a little bit first about why the Badgers are taking their position and what does this all mean?
Absolutely. And thank you, Dalton and Will, for having me. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to talk about these issues with the both of you. So looking at Xavier Lucas, there's so much to unpack here. Wisconsin put together a memorandum of understanding which asks their athlete to sign over their name, image, likeness rights. And this all goes back to that house settlement where we're going to be going into revenue sharing because the schools are looking to make that $20 million that they're going to share with the athletes. So they ask him to sign a memorandum of understanding to basically sell his NIL rights to the school, and in return, he's going to get payment. That's the first problem. The house settlement isn't final yet, so we don't know that we're actually going to have revenue sharing or that amount. So it's all predicated on the fact that the school is going to revenue share with a settlement that hasn't been finalized yet. Then Lucas says he wants to leave, and ostensibly his father is ill, and so he wants to transfer to Miami, at which point Wisconsin says, no, you signed this binding 2-year NIL agreement, and obviously we have questions with that, and refuses to put him into the transfer portal. Well, there's the second problem. The NCAA requires that if an athlete asks to be in the transfer portal, the school has 2 days to do that. So they refuse to do that. So there's a breach of NCAA rules. So Lucas then decides that he's going to find a loophole to the transfer portal, and he does. He unenrolls from Wisconsin and then re-enrolls in Miami, which then puts the NCAA back on their heels again, because now they've put a statement saying that that does not violate the rules. So huge hole with the transfer portal, because students, athletes can do this now. They can unenroll and re-enroll. That harkens back to the late 1890s when they used to do that in rowing competitions so they could play for different schools. So Wisconsin's now coming in and saying, okay, so you're there. We have evidence that Miami tampered with Lucas and with this agreement that we have, which makes sense from Wisconsin's standpoint because they want to enforce their NIL deals. Big Ten has come out and stated that they're in agreement and they are in full support of Wisconsin, because if the House settlement does go through and we do have revenue sharing, we can't have these deals happening where the kids are signing and then backing out all the time. I mean, ultimately, this is an intellectual property contract where you're signing your name, image, likeness to what would normally be an employer, but we're trying to avoid the employment situation. So it's just a name, image, likeness license agreement. And then they're going to sublicense, the schools are going to sublicense those rights in order to make some money, pay the student some of that, and be able to deal with the revenue sharing aspect.
Well, it encapsulates it really well, so I appreciate that. I do have an actual question, but a quick follow-up just for clarification, at least for my purpose. When you say the contract was for Xavier Lucas to give his NIL rights over, is Wisconsin trying to tie and marry together NIL and revenue sharing in that purpose, or does he still have the ability and freedom to go search for brand deals on the side?
Well, the actual memorandum of understanding, the NIL contract, if you will, has not been released, which then is another issue because Wisconsin is one of the states that does not have an NIL law. So theoretically, there might be an open records type of situation, but they have not released it. So it's very difficult to answer that question if it's an exclusive or a non-exclusive. My guess is it's an exclusive license.
Good enough. That helps us kind of understand something a little bit more. But, Deb, I want to point everybody's attention to this because the reason why this is so important, not just because it's not just another story in the chaos and the circus that is college athletics in today's day and age. This is big for listeners to pay attention to because it's a groundbreaking move. This will set a precedent in two folds. One, how much authority do these binding contracts have that institutions want to put in front of the athletes and that the athletes sign? Also, if the transfer portal is no longer valid or somebody can still basically transfer without using the portal, it challenges the validity of the portal as well. So if we open Pandora's box here, Deb, what's the worst case scenarios in both of these folds?
I think realistically, the worst case scenario is that you really do have that free market that the NCAA has been trying to avoid. Once you enter into a contract, to hit both of your questions, if we're enforcing binding contracts, we have to have the precedent on which to enforce them. And everything is based on the fact that there could be revenue sharing. That is a settlement that hasn't happened yet. We have a new administration in office. We have most likely a new position from the Department of Justice. There is still some question as to whether that settlement will actually happen and we will be doing this revenue sharing. So once that happens, we can unpack that particular question a little more. But as of right now, if you've entered into a contract, it should be binding, but there's oftentimes an out. And in fact, in the contracts that we expect this to look like, we see that there is a transfer out. So if you do transfer, that there would be a sell-off of name, image, likeness, maybe your jerseys or whatever. There's also most likely a clawback provision, so that if you are paid money and then you transfer or leave, that the school can get the money back. In the Xavier Lucas, no money has exchanged hands, so there's kind of no harm, no foul here yet. But that could be a big problem. The second problem, I think, is huge, which is the transfer portal. Because if the student doesn't have to enter the transfer portal, the only advantage for that portal is that then they can talk to other schools. And that's where this case with Miami is a bit troubling, because if Xavier Lucas just unenrolled and re-enrolled and didn't talk to the school about playing, which obviously he was going to play, and he had talked to the school, I think, before he committed to Wisconsin. But there's no advantage then to the transfer portal other than you can talk to schools. But if an athlete knows where they want to go, the NCAA has lost control over this transfer portal. And there are so many rules associated with it that this might open a huge hole for athletes just moving, complete free market.
Well, just what we need is one more loophole in a landscape full of potholes. So, Deb, final question. Here's what puzzled me a little bit with this Xavier Lucas thing. What was his advantage to selling anything to Wisconsin if it's his name, image, and likeness? Why not just cut your own deal and keep the dough? Because he has to cut his own deal, Will. As right now, if he gets $1 million deal, he cuts one contract, then it's up to the school to go out and resell or relicense those rights, and he's guaranteed revenue. Otherwise, he's out there, and name, image, likeness is not an easy thing to sell. If you're a top athlete, maybe you can sell name, image, likeness. That works. But if you're not, the average NIL deal is still only $1,000. So if he's looking at making all this money, it's a lot easier to sign one contract, get my money, and let them deal with it. Well, Deb, as always, it's great talking with you. And the great thing about our conversations, there's always another chapter coming up. The world of college sports these days. Yep. Well, I appreciate it, Deb. Keep warm. Thank you. You too, Will. Deb Schneider, who calls the Midwest home, and she's all bundled up because Midwest is a cold place to be right now. But it's always interesting to talk to Deb as we try to make sense of this shifting landscape in college athletics. So up next, we're going to talk some college football playoffs. Was it as good as everybody thought they hoped it would be? That's our topic in just a moment.
So, got one for you, boss.
Oh, yeah?
What's black, white, and dented all over?
I give up.
The company truck. I know, but thanks to our agent, we've already submitted an insurance claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Lucky for you, that's simple human sense.
Ask your independent agent if auto owners make sense for you.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Do you hear that? That's the sound of uncertainty lurking under your hood. You know the feeling. I know I do. That sudden sinking sensation when you see a check engine light or your car unexpectedly breaks down and you're faced with sky-high repair bills. It's time to shield against unexpected repairs with CarShield. CarShield is America's most trusted auto protection company and has an A rating with the Better Business Bureau. Don't let the fear of a breakdown keep you up at night. Trust the Shield, CarShield, and say goodbye to terrifying repair bills and hello to peace of mind. Your plan also comes with 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, rental car options, and so much more. Don't wait till it's too late. Call CarShield now before a breakdown. Protect your wallet. Protect your car with CarShield. Get our best protection ever. Call now. You'll thank me later. 800-965-1292. 800-965-1292. That's 800-965-1292.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
Did you receive a call or message that mentioned Social Security and demanded immediate action? Did the caller know your Social Security number or other personal information and tell you that your Social Security number had been used in connection with the crime? Did you feel worried that your Social Security number might be suspended, your bank account might be frozen or seized, or you could be arrested? That is not the Social Security Administration. Social Security will not threaten you, demand your personal information, or instant payment, email or text you pictures or documents, or use a real government official's name to gain your trust. Social Security does not accept payments by gift card, prepaid debit card, internet currency, or by mailing cash. Criminals use these forms of payment because they are hard to trace. Do not be fooled. Hang up. Ignore them. Report this criminal activity to the Social Security Administration Office of the Inspector General at oig.ssa.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
And welcome back for more of the Sports Life. We'll team in here along with Dalton Shetler. And don't forget auto owners insurance, simple human sense. Ask your independent agent if auto owners make sense for you. Well, the college football playoffs have come and gone, the 12-team format. So the questions remain, did it do what it was supposed to do? Was it good for the fans? Was it good for the schools? Was it good for the sport? Did it make some money? Did people watch it on TV? Well, these are some questions that Dalton and I have, and we figured Ben Portnoy from the Sports Business Journal, well, he knows all this stuff. And so, Ben, thanks for joining us. And let me start our little chat here with asking you about the ratings and the revenue. I know everybody talked about this could be a cash cow. Was it what they thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that you look at viewership, you look at obviously all the sponsorship inventory was sold, all of those things. This has been, generally speaking, what they hoped it would be. For the schools, the way it's set up, there's certainly incentives to win games. Notre Dame walks away with $20 million after all of this, based on their performance bonuses, for lack of a better term, by winning these games at $4 million around, give or take. And all of those things that you would expect to be part of a big business proposition on this front. I think it worked. Yeah, I do. I think that you also look at some of the other pieces of this, right? Like you look at the way that fans were engaged with the college football product down the stretch of the season. You look at the way, frankly, more fan bases were involved, I think, down the stretch as well. I think those things add to why you saw ratings do as well as they did down the stretch of the season. Certainly there's some questions about the ratings in the actual championship game and throughout the playoff, but I think overall, I think we saw a lot of really good things, at least in this first edition of the 12-team format.
Oh, Ben, it's really interesting because you throw in a few of the different ingredients that you'd think would make this really successful. So many teams being in the hunt for a playoff spot, everything else. It built so much anticipation around so many programs down the stretch of the season. But you mentioned there's questions around the title game because it averaged 22.1 million viewers. That's a 12% drop from the 25 million that tuned in for last year's Michigan win over Washington in the national championship game. And I don't know what to chalk this up to. Do you have any hints or clues, Ben, as to why the title game dropped to this number?
I mean, look, I think there's a few general things where you look at, obviously, it's a holiday, there's an inauguration going on. Like, those are, once every 4-year type things that might pop up, at least the inauguration piece of it. Mm-hmm. But that said, I think one of the things is you look at this calendar and you listen, no one really cares what reporters think, generally speaking, about, dates and times and whatever else. But, this season dragged on a long time, right? You get around January 8th, and I know for me at least, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, there's 2.5 more weeks of this. And it's not in a bad way. It's just a fact of the season extends a long time. And I think that when you do that, you play this game of how long can you extend things for while also still maintaining people's interest. And I think that that's a hard needle to thread. And I think when you look at that, look, right, across the board, ratings were down a little bit. Not crazy. It's not like it was a 50% drop or anything like that, but certainly ratings were down. And when you're ESPN or whoever and you're paying what you're paying for these rights, obviously you don't want to see that. I think there's some conversation to be had about the calendar and how do you format this a little bit better. Certainly, again, like I said about the other pieces, like this is it's a small needle to thread, and I think that there's the piece of this with the NFL and where they fit into that conversation. Obviously, you had two first-round games that go up directly against NFL games. Like that's not ideal, and that's not an ideal window. I do think there's going to be some pretty real conversation about how do you adjust those windows over the next couple of weeks with the CFP and everyone else. And I think maybe we don't see any vast changes for a year from now, but I do think that's going to be something that's on the table moving forward past 2026 into 2027 as the new ESPN contract comes into play.
Ben, was this good for college football?
I would say yes. I mean, I think, you look at kind of what I said at the top, like how these teams were engaged deep into the season. I think that's a really good thing, all things considered, for a sport that has become increasingly divisive in terms of how it's structured. I think that the fact that you had, 15, 20, 25 teams, like really feeling like they had a shot at this thing, with 2-3 weeks left in the season, that's a really good thing. I think, I was in South Bend for the Indiana Notre Dame first round game, the first round game of the CFP and that we ever saw. And the buzz was awesome. Like these first round games were killer. And I think that was a huge, huge win for everyone involved. Again, there's conversations we had about TV windows and things like that. But I do think that at its base level, I think the 12-team CFP did what we hoped it would do over time.
Ben, I kind of want to ask you a macro question. I don't know if you'll have an insight to this, but as we know, in our culture and society, sports are incredibly popular. I mean, extremely popular, and they've only risen in popularity. But we mentioned that the title game numbers were down a little bit. Now, granted, it wasn't a dramatic drop, to your point, but we've also seen the NBA. The ratings are way down in that league. We saw NFL playoffs, the numbers dip a little bit. I'm curious if there's any common denominator across these sports that have caused for ratings to drop a little bit. Is it the streaming platforms being involved? Peacock and some others that maybe people don't have a subscription to? What do you kind of chalk it up to? Because sports are still just as popular as ever.
Yeah, I mean, look, the linear to cable conversation is one we've been having for 10, 15 years now at this point. And I think that about, people cord cutting and going to cable increasingly less. Now there's still a huge chunk of people that are on cable, but I do think that because of the way that cable has evolved, that streaming platforms have evolved, I think that dilutes is probably not the right word, but it gives people an option to watch something else, right? You're not locked into your 150 channels or you go further back, your 10 channels, right? And I think that there's something to be said for that, right? Like people have more options. People aren't necessarily hostage to whatever's on TV a little bit. And I think that's a big piece of it. I think that, obviously, there's just so many things on television at one time, whether it's streaming or cable or otherwise, that I think that, again, it's hard to captivate or to capture an audience in the way that it has been done for years. Now, again, I don't think that the CFP being down, 8% or 12% or whatever it is necessarily an indictment on the entire system. But I do think there's something to that, and I think we've seen that for a long time, and this is just another sort of bullet point in that conversation.
Well, Ben, what we talked about this year was who the 12 teams are going to be, and then we followed Ohio State's fabulous journey to the title. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of bowl games going on out there, some not very sexy. Because of the success of what's happening and maybe the expansion of this playoff, could that trim down the excessive number of bowls we have in general?
This is a really interesting question, and I think it gets brought up most postseasons, at least the last 5 years, of what do we do about the bowl system with the playoff in place. And I think that there's a couple prongs here. I would say one, people still watch bowl games. Like ESPN, you look at the ratings, the games still rate really, really, really well. I mean, even the FCS national championship game rates in the 2 millions or the high 1.8 million, 2 million, if not more, range. So postseason football rates well. Secondly, ESPN needs inventory over this stretch of time, right? Over the course of December, right? People are home for the holidays, New Year's, whatever. ESPN needs something to put on TV, and the bowl games are that. So I think that, and the fact that ESPN controls the vast majority of these bowl games, it's, I'm making up a number, but it's, 25 out of 30, give or take, that goes a long way. That's a big piece of this, right? Like ESPN's not just going to give up inventory for the sake of giving up inventory, especially when it rates well. Now, I do think there is a conversation to be had of some of these lower end bowl games of how are the schools going to afford it? You look at what's happening with the House settlement and everything that schools might be asked, generally speaking, of if you have schools that are going to be participating in revenue sharing or something along those lines, right? Whatever that looks like, that's money that schools have to spend on athletes. And most athletic departments, if you ask around and you talk to a group of 5 programs that are going to bowl games or, even lower level Power 5 schools, like a lot of schools lose money by going to a bowl game. And I think that is not something that's going to fly moving forward. Now, where does that sort of hit the fork in the road? I'm not sure. I do think, though, there is a conversation of, do you shrink this down from it being a 5-day trip to a 3-day trip or a 2-day trip? Are there ways to simplify this? Do you go from saying 6 wins is bowl eligible to 7 or 8 outside the whatever conferences? Maybe there's some argument to be had there. But I do think that's a real conversation that people are having. I do think it's going to become more of a conversation as schools are having to jump into the revenue sharing world and having to find ways to make more money. Like, that's a real conversation that I think a lot of folks are saying. Like, I talked to one group of 5 AD a couple of days ago, and they joked. They said, shoot, I'd rather go 5-7 than rebuild in the transfer portal than go 6-6 and have to spend that money on a bowl game. And I think that's not a crazy line of thinking for a lot of folks. And I think that people will. I think that becomes an increasingly popular conversation, at least in the coming years.
Well, Ben, as always, appreciate it. I'm sure we'll visit with you soon because this landscape is not stable. It's always shifting.
That it is. It is. There's no shortage of things going on, and with the CFP and what format that might take and everything else, it is a crazy world, and it is only getting crazier.
Well, Ben, thanks a lot.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Ben Portnoy from the Sports Business Journal. Well, so far so good, I guess, Dalton, when it comes to the playoffs, but does it get bigger? Do we condense the dates? There's always something to talk about, right?
Most certainly is. Well,
when we come back with more of the Sports Live, we're going to talk about our parting shots. It's all coming up in just a moment.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Dad. Did you get a new haircut or something? A new shirt? You're looking good.
What happened?
A little fender bender?
How little?
A few days in the shop little, but thanks to Mom and our agent, we've already submitted a claim and can track the status right from the app. Auto owners pays what they owe without any hassle.
Sounds like simple human sense.
I'm fine, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask.
Ask your independent agent if auto owners make sense for you.
Everything is expensive right now. Gas, food, you name it. You're spending more, you are making the same or less money. So, what do? You rack up credit card debt. That's what you do. It's not your fault. It's the economy. And guess what? If you rack up too much credit card debt like some of us, you can't pay your bills. Then the credit card companies, as nice as they are, start hounding you for money. Then you start your downward spiral. A smart thing for you to do is to call the Zero Debt. They can help you consolidate all your credit card bills into one affordable payment. Millions of people have done it. It works to make you debt-free. Make this free call right now. It costs you nothing to learn more.
800-298-9093. 800-298-9093. 800-298-9093. That's 800-298-9093.
We are strong, we are resilient, and we will get through this together. But these are stressful times, and it's important to also practice good self-care. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or afraid, but there is hope. Reach out to someone, connect with your friends, stay in touch with your community, and know that you are not alone. Learn more at wearebroadcasters.com/hope. Furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is The Sports Life.
I found hope in the midst of an overwhelming situation.
Alcoholism is a disease that can affect any family. Everyone suffers, but there is help and hope at Al-Anon Family Groups.
Al-Anon gave me my life back. I'm a better father and husband.
Are you in an overwhelming situation because of someone else's drinking?
Al-Anon and Alateen can help.
Local and virtual meetings are available. Maybe one could work for you. Call 1-866-200-0033 or visit alanon.org/hope.
I'm Naheem Hines, professional football player. No matter the challenges I face every day in the NFL, my mom is always there for me, despite her own struggles with muscular dystrophy. And MDA is there for my mom. At their 150 care centers across the U.S., MDA is the leading organization in research and care for kids and adults with muscular dystrophy, ALS, and related neuromuscular diseases. Join me and learn more at helpmda.org today. Thank you.
And welcome back for more of the Sports Life. Will Teeman here along with Dalton Shetler. Well, fun show this week. We've talked about the journey of the Buckeyes. Took a look at the college football playoffs, good, bad, and a look at what we think is the landscape of intercollegiate athletics for today, which probably won't be the same tomorrow. But with that, it's now time for our parting shot. So, Dalton, what do you got?
And by the way, I do want to let everybody know if you missed any of that or you liked it so much, you want to hear it again, make sure you give us a follow at Sports Life Now on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. We're at Sports Life Now. We post all the interviews in the entire show there. For my parting shot, of course, we mentioned and we celebrated a little bit with the voice of the Buckeyes in the show, Paul Keels, that the Ohio State Buckeyes are national champions. And of course, if you think back to last year, Michigan won the national championship. So that's back-to-back years now. The Big Ten has been atop of the football world, right, in college football. Mike Hall of the Big Ten Network did a really neat thing where he went back and took a look to see when's the last time that's happened, where the Big Ten has had back-to-back national champions in college football. His search took him all the way back to the mid-'60s. 1965, 1966, both were won by Michigan State, of course, back in the Duffy Doherty days there in East Lansing. But how about that? A search of about 60 years for the last time the Big Ten went back-to-back. Pretty cool what happened this year.
Yeah, it's very cool, actually. Well, what I'm about to talk about isn't so cool. This came out of Bloomington, Indiana this week. The headline is that Indiana lays off 25 as revenue sharing nears. First paragraph says, Indiana University has laid off 25 athletic department employees as it prepares for revenue sharing with athletes that is expected to begin this year, according to multiple reports. 25 people just lost their jobs. And this is not the end of what this storyline looks like. We're going to see this on many other fronts. But at the end of the day, 25 people don't have a job right now because there's no controls over spending in athletic departments. And I don't think this is the answer. Laying off 25 people probably is not the way to go. How about getting legislation and rules in place and bring some law and order to this thing? And then if you want to lay off some people, that's your business. So there you go. As always, thanks for joining us for our show this week. And we should also note that you can find us wherever you find your podcasts, like SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple. And make sure to check us out and hit subscribe. As always, thanks to the Big Ten Network. The Sports Life is produced by Dalton Shetler and assisted by Owen Cronin. Our executive producer is Wendy Hart. So on behalf of Dalton Shetler, I'm Will Teeman, and thanks for your time.